coalition of churches, nonprofits, labor unions, civic organizations that come together around common issues in order to build power for change. I mean, that's really the short of it.
Especially in action. I think, faith without works is dead. And then equality of seeing that everyone has a seat at the table. And then also love. Without love, we won't be able to do anything, or nothing will be fruitful of what we do. And then benevolence is the kindness. Just showing kindness in a mean world, I think speaks volume, as well as there are so many people that have it in their heart that they want to do something, but don't know how to do it, or where to do it, or how to get involved. And so right now, what Caleb is at the right moment is because we're just a reflection of allowing people to see that it can no longer happen on our watch. I think that the time of change is always now. There's never a period where we can wait for justice to come. We're going to have to make it come. I think that the time is right now because we have so many committed and dedicated people that have sacrificed their time to say, I want to be involved. Not just speak of what they want to do, but actually put their heart and their soul and their monies behind it. And I think that's what has helped us. When you have dedicated people, when you have committed people, when you have people that have found their passion, that's what has made the difference. We have been able to connect people that have found their passion. They have found their voice, and they are using it.
Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're able to join us today, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook Live. This is the first of our city council forums from Caleb's Economic Mobility Task Force. So we are so excited to welcome Councilwoman Coonrod and Mr. Scott, and then Mr. Clark should be joining us shortly as well. But we are so excited for y'all to be here with us. Again, this is a forum that's particularly focused on issues of accountability and transparency in government and in how our city develops. So we'll, in just a moment, we'll allow the candidates to introduce themselves. But before that, just a little rundown of what we're going to be doing today. We're going to have an introduction from candidates. And then we're going to have a very, very short 7-minute condensed presentation of our campaign platform to make sure that we are clarifying our issues. And then we're going to have an opportunity to get into some of these issues with our candidates. At the end, we will have an opportunity for an open public Q&A. So if you do have questions, feel free to either, if you're on Zoom, put them in the chat, or if you're on Facebook Live, please put them in the comments. So with that, we'll allow each of the candidates to share just briefly a minute and a half introduction to your campaign and why you're running for city council. So we're going to start with Mr. Scott. Oh, Mr. Scott, I believe you're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. So thank y'all for inviting me to come out and to speak with you all and to discuss and share some of the ideas on the issues that you all have. I'm running for City Council District 9 because I feel like going forward, there are some things that we need to pay closer attention to, that we need to address going forward as it comes to safety, economic development, and equality in the jobs area. And so I've asked my several community people what their concerns were. So this is not something that I just came up on my own, but I actually talked to some people and got this information. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a former Hamilton County Election Commissioner. I did that for 6 years. I'm currently working for the Tennessee Valley Authorities. I'm presently on the Hamilton County Juvenile Court Foster Care Board. I'm also a assistant coach at Howard High School Academy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scott. All right, we'll go to Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you so much. It's so good to see you guys. Can't wait till we get back active amongst each other after this COVID numbers are going down. I'm Councilwoman Coonrod. I'm your family member. I'm your friend. I'm a foster care parent. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. I'm an aunt. I'm a descendant of a slave, and I'm a believer. And I'm seeking re-election again to continue the great work that we're doing in District 9 and across our city of Chattanooga. As you know, everything that I do is I inform my constituents in that basis, the things that I move forward on. So we're going to continue the movement with economic development. We're going to continue to address absolute poverty, and that encompasses the whole entire family when we're talking about wage issues. We're talking about equitable opportunity for all types of housing structures, and also building capacity with our community members so they will understand why fighting for things to happen in their community. So for District 9, a great thing that's happening is the River to the Ridge Area 3 plan. And to continue to work to act, because it is just a plan, but moving forward over the next 4 years, we will activate that plan by reaching out with different partners and partnering with our community members as well to make sure that the desires of the community are implemented in that plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Councilwoman.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mr. Clark, we're just doing very quick candidate introductions in a minute and a half. Who you are, why you're running, and what your plans are for economic mobility in the city. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, there we go. So yeah, we've had to do some quick technology switches here. My internet crashed right before the meeting. But anyway, thank you again to Caleb and Austin for doing this tonight. I am Dennis Clark. I am the District 5 City Council candidate, and I'm basically running for City Council because I'm really sick and tired of the people in my community not having access to the opportunities that our city has to offer. So I'm going to use my experience as a small business executive, as a nonprofit advocate, as a community organizer with organizations I know you guys are familiar with. And I'm going to be a public champion and bring housing opportunities, economic and small business opportunities to the Highway 58 and Brandon Road areas. We're going to bring youth development opportunities to end the school to prison pipeline. And these are just different opportunities that we need to take advantage of to make sure that the people who live in my community we're getting our fair share of the budget that oftentimes doesn't reach our community. So again, I'm Dennis Clark, and I'm glad to be here to answer your questions. And I'm probably going to switch to my laptop. And so let me get that going back up now that it looks like things are coming back up. But thanks again for having me tonight.
Great, thanks so much. Well, before we dive into the specific questions around accountability and transparency, we're going to play a 7-minute video that just gives a very quick introduction to our campaign. The full version is 45 minutes long, and you can see that on our website. But we want to make sure that we're starting with some clarity. So I'm going to start that. If we share the screen here. Here we go. And if there's any audio issues, please put them in the chat.
Our values, or what good development looks like, are living wages. No one should have to work more than one full-time job to provide for themselves or their family. Community stability. Investment should increase opportunity and quality of life for low and moderate income families. Every Chattanoogan deserves secure housing in a safe and thriving community. Our third value is equitable transit. When people have access to safe, affordable public transit, they're able to get to jobs, training, and education that provide pathways to economic sustainability.
And so what do we want? We want transparency and accountability. We want transparency and a community voice in decisions involving public money that will impact our neighborhoods. And we want accountability, community-centered metrics that ensure that companies who get public resources are actually benefiting our people. And what we want, good development. Good development happens with us and not to us.
The real focus of our Development With Us campaign is
That's on our end. Hold on just 1 minute. Make sure it's loading. Apologies for the technical difficulties. Let's try this again. This is the Caleb Coalition's Economic Mobility Task Force.
and that is the tax breaks and incentives deals that are given as part of our recruitment of employers.
And every year, there are companies that receive tax breaks from our city. They're receiving public incentives to build their buildings and do business. And so we had some questions. What's the real magnitude of tax breaks in terms of real dollars? How do tax breaks work? Who decides which companies receive a tax break? How do we make sure that these decisions actually improve our health, wages, financial security, and life circumstances? And most importantly, where do you and I fit into that? So just last year, the amount of corporate property taxes that were forgiven or written off by the city of Chattanooga and Hamilton County totaled over $25 million. And typically these tax agreements last between 10 and 30 years.
That tax revenue, if it were collected, would be part of funding our local infrastructure, public safety, parks, libraries, neighborhood services. And when those essential public services come under strain, or when there is a lack of tax revenue, this is part of the reason why.
Not that tax incentive deals are necessarily bad. In fact, sometimes they're very needed, but we have questions about them. So it turns out with that $25 million that was given out in tax breaks last year, over 90% of these were given through a type of tax breaks called the jobs pilot. And typically these are used to help attract new development and new companies to the city.
A pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. It's basically an agreement between the city and a company that provides the company with a tax break for getting here. So it's an incentivization deal to get businesses to develop here. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. They create, because we want development here, we want jobs here. But before we, start handing out jobs pilots, willy-nilly, we want to ask a few questions.
Do these tax breaks actually create real benefit for our communities? Is it worth what we would lose in property tax revenue? And would the company locate here anyway? Do they even need the incentive in the first place?
So I just want to talk a little bit about the current process for that and lay it out in a little comic. First, the city hires the Chamber of Commerce to recruit businesses to Chattanooga. From there, businesses will complete a jobs pilot application, and then the Chamber of Commerce reviews that application. So what about the public? Well, unfortunately, there are no publicly adopted criteria for jobs pilots and how those get put forward. And so there are no required public hearings and no staff report at this point. So very little public involvement. Next, the city's Industrial Development Board, also known as the IDB, conducts a final review of the pilot application. The IDB takes ownership of the land, equipment, buildings of the company, and then the company leases the assets from the IDB for a small amount. And so the big question we're asking here tonight, are these agreements benefiting our communities?
You've heard the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't know, how much this map is worth. Basically, we won't go into the detail on it, but what it shows, anything you see in a color is tax advantaged, which is to say it doesn't pay property taxes the way you and I do. So in it, we're showing pilots, we're showing tax increment financing, and we're also showing government-owned properties, which are tax exempt. And I think what this map tells us is that we've got a lot of properties in the city of Chattanooga that are colored. And so they're not saying they're not paying their fair share. There's some good reasons why some of them are not. But you can see when you take those properties out of the mix that the burden falls to the rest of us, to small businesses, to homeowners and all like that. So also given the fact that, as we said earlier, that this represents about $25 million just in tax incentives, we need to be really careful before we add more color to this map. As we've said earlier, we're not against all tax incentives, but we believe we need to be strategic. We need to make sure that any incentive, and we're talking specifically here about jobs pilots, that there is significant public benefit in terms of the number of jobs, the investment, but also the wages of these jobs. And also we need to make sure that the but-for test is met. The but-for test means without the incentive, we wouldn't be here. We feel like that some of the pilots that we've given in the past, the company likely would have located regardless. It was more the sort of the icing on the cake, and the cake was already baked. So we need to be really careful. We need to be strategic, we believe, in the future.
The process for actually
All right.
arranging these pilots is extremely opaque.
All right. Thank y'all so much. And so now we're actually going to get into some discussion and really hear from the candidates about their thoughts about accountability and transparency in development, and accountability and transparency in general in the city. So the way we're going to do this, we have several prompt questions. And those prompts are going to be asked, and then each candidate is going to have up to 2 minutes for their initial response. And I'll let you know, I'll make sure we know which candidate the question is going to. And then after that, we're going to have some follow-up, and we're going to be able to have a little bit of a discussion. And so there's 2 main prompt questions that we'll get to, and then some discussion for each. So does that sound okay? All right, so the first question is going to come from Ms. Janice Walwyn.
Well, good afternoon to you, to each of you. Our first question is, as we've researched and talked to a variety of stakeholders about our current processes for granting tax incentives, we were surprised by the lack of information provided to both the public and the key decision makers. Were there specific items in our Develop With Us presentation that you were surprised to learn? And secondly, were there aspects of the process you would like to change?
All right, so for the first response, we're going to go to Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Janice, for that question. You know, to be honest with you, I'm familiar with tax incremental finances and jobs pilots, but what I was surprised to learn is that in government, we usually allow people input in hearings, especially when you're talking about that type of money that we're not putting back into the city budget, but that we're actually giving to companies that may want to come here or probably will come here anyway. So very shocked to learn that there's not a formal hearing process. And I'm shocked to learn that even with the Industrial Development Board, there's not a public input process. And I can't believe that, because these are public monies. And so it's a lot of irony when we start talking about who spends public money and we don't give the public an opportunity to weigh in on that. So I'm really surprised to learn that there's not a public hearing process. I do think we need to implement one to make sure that when we're discussing public dollars, that by law, not just by option, but by law, that there's a city ordinance that requires the Industrial Development Board to implement a very thorough public hearing process. So again, thank you for that question.
All right, Thank you. So next we're going to go to Councilwoman Coonrod.
So much, Ms. Janice, and yes, every time I see the presentation, I've got an issue with it. My heart is racing now thinking about how to carefully say my response. But the process here is that it needs to be a thorough process of engaging of our citizens from the beginning. So once it comes through with the chamber, we need to start engagement at that point. Because once it comes to council, like they'll present it, economic community development, they'll present it, and then there's comments and, you know, public input and that kind of thing. And then it comes to council for a vote and we send it over to IDB. And supposedly they're supposed to still continue that same process with making sure that input is available. So if that's not happening come Monday, I'm going to correct that action because it's what I'm hearing you guys say that it's not happening. And so what I would like to change by viewing that, there's a lot of government property that's, you know, colored there. That's why we created the land bank. And so those properties should be automatically placed into a land bank so we can have, you know, work with developers and different people and the community to say what we would like to have done with this city property. And so I think that's, yeah, I'll leave it at that. But great question, Ms. Janice.
Great, thank you. All right, then we're going to go to Mr. Scott. Oh, Mr. Scott, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I think it should be community involvement in any decision making that's going to affect the community, whether it be business or whether you're going to divert some tax money or that. But my major problem is, why isn't it starting with the chamber? I feel like it should start with the city council first. I think you're giving an outside source too much power, and then when it does not go correct, the elected official have to answer for this stuff. So I think it should start in the city council first, and then they have meetings with the chamber and then the ID board, and then they should be able to report back. But I think when you divert a lot of stuff and you give certain entities that kind of power, then you wind up getting left out the loop. And then when they're not having to be made to come back and discuss what they're doing, they can just make their own decision. I don't agree with that, because at the end of the day, the constituents is not going to hold the chamber accountable. They're not going to hold the ID board accountable. They're going to come back to the elected official that represent that area.
Appreciate that response. Well, so we want to dig in on that a little bit. And so I think all three of y'all really were stressing this idea of we do need more public engagement. We do need greater participation from the public. So I guess the follow-up question would be, we know that finding really clear methods of ways to engage your constituents that aren't just tokenizing is hard. We know that's difficult, and it's not an easy task. But do y'all have specific ideas about exactly how you would seek to get more direct public engagement into these processes? And I think anyone can take it. Try to keep your responses around a minute or under if possible, but who wants to go first?
I think you set up public forums to where you get direct response from the public. Then I also think that you should meet with your neighborhood presidents as another way of getting their input or whatnot, and then collectively come up with solutions to these different questions, or these different different questions that they will have about this particular business, or about, do we really need to give them 10 years, maybe 5 years? You know, I know 10 years is probably the average that they go and give for these tax incentives, but I think that is an area that I would like to see us do.
Appreciate that.
I think for me, I will continue to do what I've always done. And I'm an out of the box thinker. So I typically reach out to people that we don't normally think of to reach out to, because we stay connected to the same 5 people that we say are the voices for the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's bigger than that. We have to take it past just those 5 people and reach out to everybody. So if that's through, social media, that's through newsletters, that's through a personal phone call, because it's an ongoing campaign. And, reach out to different grassroots organizations as well to have their input and thoughts, and set up different various meetings, or Zoom now, since we're in the midst of COVID. And then also, like, we have to make sure that we understand the parameters of what it is. So council members, we're not in the business of recruiting businesses. So therefore, that's why it wouldn't come to us first. It's a great idea, and maybe that's something that we can, think about doing, or maybe changing it, but that requires a lot of input to think. So the role of the chamber, that's their job, is to do that and to work alongside with economic development. Now, if we were to say we don't want to partner with them, and then we just do that in-house with our economic and community development, but again, it still wouldn't come to the wheelhouse of our council members then. But I do agree that it's time for us to culturally and systematically start doing things a little different.
Thank you, Austin, for that question. Really the job of a public servant, when you talk about how do you involve and engage people, it's really simple. You go to where people are. And we have a lot of public servants who that's hard. People sit in their ivory towers, and they expect the public to come to them. We've got to reverse that mindset for the people that we elect, and we got to hold them accountable. One way I think we should continue to do that is to really involve our grassroots level organizations. These are our people who are on the front line of activism. These are the Equity Alliance. These are the unions. These are, CCJ. And then also, you got to go to the subject matter experts. I don't pretend to know everything about any of this economic development stuff, but I'm smart enough to know that if I need information, I need to go to people who understand it. And oftentimes we see where the mayor will surround himself around people who don't, in his executive branch, who don't have that knowledge base, and it stops there. And so as council people, we've got to do outreach. That's how you engage people, is to go outside of council, go outside of the mayor's office, go outside of the chamber and meet people where they are. That's in barbershops, that's at Walmart. Wherever you want to go to talk to people, hold a forum on a sidewalk or at a rec center. Do something different, think outside of the box to be more engaging to people who aren't normally a part of the process. And that's what I'm going to promote.
Before we go on to the next prompt, got one more follow-up, particularly for Councilwoman Coonrod, but for the others as well. So, I mean, you mentioned that the council does sort of have a specific role in this process. And I think as we were diving into the research and really trying to ourselves understand how these tax incentives get done, I think one of the concerns was when the public is able to get involved and how they're able to get involved. We know that the chamber has a critical role in helping to identify businesses and bring folks to the city. But I think one of the concerns is, how do we make sure that whether it's the chamber or whoever else is identifying these businesses, that there's actually clear criteria that are informed by the public interest in that process. And I know this is a little bit of an in the weeds question, but do you have thoughts on how we might be able to insert that earlier on?
Right, absolutely. It's just a matter of connecting grassroots organizations with the chamber, right? To making sure that they understand, hey, we would love to be a part of this process. When you first get the application, or a business that's interested in coming to, our city, and getting everybody connected that, would love to be a part of that. And that has to start on that level. And of course, I will make connections. And for those, I've always share and ask, like, who's interested in being involved, because I want to position you to where you can be involved. But if we're not aware, Austin, that you want to be involved in these conversations, or that, certain things matter, then we're not just mind readers. Everybody does. Over the 20,000 people that I represent in my district, I feel like every one of them should be involved in all the issues that affect them when we're making decisions about their community. So yeah, you got my word on that. I will, send well, we're already connected in doing that, but just making sure that we make the connection with the chamber to get you guys involved.
Appreciate that. Are there other, Mr. Scott or Mr. Clark, you'll have any thoughts on that?
Kelvin, you're muted.
Yes. Oh, go ahead, Dennis. I can wait till after you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think what's really important, Austin, and just to kind of piggyback, and I'm sure Kelvin's gonna talk about this a little bit more, but I want to piggyback what Demetrus said. We have got to know the role of certain government officials. Trust me, as a city council person, I want to make, I want to decriminalize marijuana. I want to do a lot of stuff. I want to go take money out of the federal government and put it right into the city budget. There is a process, and oftentimes we begin to hold city council people responsible for what your state representative does, you know what I mean? Or what your state senator does, or even what the Department of Labor does for the state, or the governor. And so when we talk about who recruits businesses to the city of Chattanooga and then who holds them accountable, yeah, it's a conversation between city council members and the chamber, because we do, and maybe Coonrod can correct this on me, but I do think we do give some funding to the chamber to recruit businesses here, but ultimately that's where it starts. And we need to stop just holding city council people accountable, but I'd love to start holding some of these economic people who we put in these positions accountable. Let's do forums with chamber people. Let's do forums with Donna Williams at the Department of Economic, and let's start asking them these tough questions. You know what I mean? The city council is a legislative body. Let me say that again. It's a legislative body. It's an advocacy group. And so when we start having conversations about accountability, let's make sure we're having the conversation about who is really responsible, so we can bring them to the table and ask them the right questions.
Appreciate that. Appreciate that. Mr. Scott?
Yes, I agree with that. And I constantly keep hearing, what the state job is, what the city job is, all those things. But you constantly seeing elected officials that always come in and step over their bounds as to what their jobs are. But then when you question them about certain, that's not our area, we're just a legislative body. Anybody that you designate funds from or you approve funds of a budget has a responsibility to be accountable to you. You cannot just give them funding and then they can go run and do whatever they want to do and not come back to you and say, hey, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we would like to do, so that the city council person can be updated and they can inform their constituents. Because at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, they're not going to go to the chamber. They're not going to go to the ID board. They're going to come to their elected representative to ask those questions. And it's easy to say, well, our job is just to do this and just. I done seen all 9 city councilmen step outside their box on things that has nothing to particularly directly do with their job.
Appreciate that. And I think that point around clarification of roles is well taken, that everyone mentioned. Well, we have another prompt, and we can feel free, if you start to think about some things related to this question, you can bring them back up, but we are going to move to a second prompt, and that's going to be from
Austin.
Oh yeah,
really
go ahead.
Quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because, in case you all aren't aware, is that the pilots, until it takes a second government body to approve it, so the county also have to have, approve the pilot, and if they're not on board, then it's not going to happen more than likely. And so just want to put that out there, like it just doesn't stop with us. So the county commissioners, we work well together when it comes to pilots that are, that come forward to the council. So just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
100%. Well, appreciate that. And that actually, I think, segues into Ms. Janice Gooden's question.
Thank you, Austin. Currently, Chattanooga functions under a strong mayor form of government, with the mayor providing primary direction and the city council providing advice and final consent for plans put forward by the mayor's office. How would you interact and work with the mayor to help ensure that your constituents' voices are being represented and acted upon?
Right. From this one, we're going to start with Mr. Scott.
Thank you for that question. I think we need to do a better job of communication. A lot of times when the mayor comes up with different things that they're trying to get done, they already know they got the 5 votes. So really you at a minimum, they know they got the 5 votes. So you're already behind the 8 ball when you have not been privileged to conversations of things that they want to get done. I think it needs to be a little bit more transparency from the mayor to the council. Here again, the council get beat up more than the mayor get beat up because people think that's the first line of defense, and that they do get an opportunity to vote on a lot of things that the mayor does. So I think we need to do a better job of communicating, and the mayor need to do a better job of explaining and being accountable and opening up to the council so they can make good decisions on what they vote on, but also that they can inform and report back to their constituents.
Thank you for that. Right, then next we're going to go to Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Ms. Gooden, for that question. I think it's, I keep hearing this whole notion of a strong mayor, weak council. And I really don't know where it comes from. I thought maybe it was in the charter, but we have perpetuated the idea that the mayor, the executive branch, unfortunately has more influence than the legislative branch, which is where more input comes in for the people. That's where the public hearings come from. And so if anything, we need a strong council and a collaborative mayor, meaning that in instances where they wait, and Councilwoman Coonrod can attest to this, the mayor will do the budget and then they'll send it to council to only look at it for what, about 3 to 4 weeks. That's not a collaborative process. As a matter of fact, it weakens the legislative branch, which in my opinion is the most important branch because it represents the 9 areas of the city that make up the city council, which is the checks and balance branch of the government. So I will, when I'm elected council, we'll ask the mayor simply to do 1 or 2 things. Come to city council. The county does it. You don't have to come up there and sit on the dais, but it would be nice every now and then to ask questions directly from the real chief executive officer, which is the mayor, who oftentimes is not a part of the legislative process, but unfortunately is responsible for the budgetary process when it's presented to council. And so I believe in a strong council and a collaborative mayor.
Awesome, thank you for that. All right, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, and great question, Ms. Gooding. So the council have a lot of power on council. It's just we need to have members, a part of the council, that understand the power that they have, right? And that's according to the charter and the different things that we're supposed to do and are able to do. And a lot of times they get fearful because administration, they use those things, certain things, to try to barter you. And people get afraid. Well, I may lose a sidewalk if I'm standing for the rights or the things that my community members, that they should be having for their community, and I'm okay with that. So what I do with the mayor is that I have meetings, scheduled meetings with my community members, grassroots organizations, and we talk about, the things that are happening within the budget, certain concerns that my district have, how he can better, bring to life what they want to see to happen. But not just that, with the mayor, is that we can have conversations with him about what's happening in our district, but we have to build relationships, and which I have with, private partners, to get them on board to invest in the district. That's the key point, because we have a lot of people that are, they don't get any funding from the government, and they come into our communities and build. So we have to be, and that has nothing to do with the mayor. And so just continued strong relationships and making sure that our communities know that they're the first point of contact and to get them engaged. Look, they can email us, they can email our mayor as well and scheduling meetings.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Well, so as a quick follow-up, so one of the things we know, city council members, I think Mr. Clark mentioned this, you're expected to be the world. You're expected to be experts in everything, but you can't be. And we know that's difficult. And you can't be an expert in every issue. So with that in mind, though, what are some particular forms of additional independent support that you would expect a new mayor to provide city council members to help ensure that you can actually be informed and do your job well? So what are some particular forms of support that as a city council person you would want? And for this, let's start with Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, and that's a great question as well. I know you will often, you've heard me say, and I will continue to say, that we need to have the correct information in order so we can, serve our community the best way possible and make the right decisions. But a lot of times they want to, they mislead us with information, and that's done on purpose, right? So you can vote a certain way. And so, and they're supposed to provide us with the information. And of course, we're asking questions, but it's the right questions that you have to ask to get the correct information. And that's their job. Like the departments, they're supposed to give you that information. The mayor, to be honest with you all, he rarely knows what's going on and if the departments are giving you that information or not, right? And to me, that's an issue. You're running our city and you're not even aware of all the things that's going on, but he is aware of when the process for the budget is taking place. And so it's just a matter of holding our department heads accountable, to making sure that we're getting it and making sure that whoever is the chair for the council, when they attend those weekly meetings, that they making sure that they're holding them accountable to giving us the information.
All right, Mr. Clark and Mr. Scott.
Who are you calling on, Austin?
Either one, whichever of y'all, if y'all have thoughts on that prompt.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'll jump in really quick. I think, the mayor has the luxury of budgeting his own staff. That includes all of those people you see in the executive branch with great salaries that are called policy advisors and director of this and a director of that. The council doesn't have any support staff. You have maybe some people who do some of the clerical administrative stuff. And so one of the things that I hope that we can do is to offer a little bit more support to the council staff when it comes to policy researchers, when it comes to policy advisement, when it comes to just really helping the council get information, like Councilwoman Coonrod said, that doesn't readily come available to the council until after the budget is done or after they're presenting, some legislation or a resolution. And so I'd like for them to add some support staff to the council to really help us maximize our jobs. The city council people are only part-time people, but we have a full-time obligation to make sure the city is being ran properly, but yet we don't have the right support staff when it comes to research and development. So I think that's, to answer your question directly, if we could collaborate with the mayor to get that in the budget to support the council, I think that would be one collaborative auxiliary that we could do to really help improve our relationship with the executive branch.
Mr. Scott, you have anything on that point?
Oh, yes, I'm in agreement with both. I think that the city council is very understaffed. You have one or two secretaries trying to take care of 9 people is almost impossible. And so a lot of things slip through the cracks. But I think that the mayor should be more accountable as to quality of information that is given, and that is given in a timely manner, that the city council people have opportune moments to thoroughly go through and dissect and understand totally what they're voting on, what they're approving, and not get something, you think you're voting on one thing and then you come back and say, oops, oh, this is really what you voted on. So I think a little more clarity, transparency no more communicating. And I agree, we need to hold more of the directors accountable for making sure that their stuff is deciphered down to the city council.
Excellent. Well, thanks, y'all. Well, it looks like we don't have a whole lot of Q&A from the public at this point. So what we're going to do, we're going to go with one more prompt question. And I'm going to turn it over to Rob for that question.
I thank you all for taking part in this conversation here tonight. As we noted in our presentation at the beginning for the Economic Mobility Task Force of Caleb, we're not opposed to tax incentives overall. We're not expecting the process to become inefficient, say. We want good economic development policy. And so on this note of collaboration between the public and private parties to the way that these deals are developed between the different bodies of local government, we really want to stress the need for a larger economic development vision, a plan that really represents all the diverse interests and stakeholders in the community. And we would like to ask each of you, what do you think, or what steps would you take to help us move toward a process of that longer term thinking that incorporates all of the different voices that need to be heard? And Councilman Coonrod, you mentioned the River to Ridge Area 3 plan. We would love explicit examples like that too.
And for this one, we'll start with Mr. Clark.
Can you repeat some of that question just a little bit, please? Is it just how do we plan to be more inclusive towards more grassroots organizations, or?
No, what steps would you take to help us move toward a process of longer term economic planning,
okay,
that can help ensure shared benefits, sustainable benefits for community members?
Gotcha. I think I kind of understand that question. When we talk about economic planning in Chattanooga, and how do we become more inclusive with that? You really got to look at issues of equity, and you got to look at issues dealing with systemic racism. There was a disparity study done that showed different inequalities in wage growth for different departments. There was also another study that shows you which districts get the most money, and guess what? It's not the Black ones. When I say the Black ones, I'm talking about the predominantly Black ones, where you see being represented by council people of color, which includes my district, where we have the most infrastructure issues when it comes to street paving. Everybody wants to talk about putting money into street paving, but it's just like who, for where? And so I think, again, I'm kind of struggling with your question, but when it comes to economic justice, which is what I'm mostly concerned about, is that how do we create a budgetary process that makes sure that all people are included? And that includes, for me, getting rid of the budgeting for outcomes process. I don't think it's been effective, and I think when you look at how that process systematically leaves out communities of color, I think it actually creates inequalities. Like I said, there's plenty of studies that show that money from city budgets are not reaching communities of color. We need more grassroots involvement in the budgetary process before it's presented to city council. And that, unfortunately, has to start at the executive branch. But I think as a city council person, we can start having that conversation with whoever the next mayor is going to be, that we demand more input from the grassroots level for economic justice, or I will not be voting for a budget that does not include proper involvement in civic engagement from people of color, from vulnerable people, from people who are left out. So I hope that answers your question, Rob. If not, someone throw me a follow-up question, because I feel like I kind of fluffed on that question a little bit, but
it's okay. We'll have
my heart though.
We'll have time for one quick follow-up after this, but let's
you.
go to Mr. Scott.
Yes, I think we need to have more diversity involvement. And as I looked at the 2020 budget, I was appalled that you have all these top-heavy salaries and very little money to actually take care of what you what you're trying to take care of, like economic development. You look at over 60-70% of the money that's put into that is for salaries. So how can you effectively put money into the different programs when it's top heavy with salaries and you have very little money to function to really do what you need to do? So I think that process needs to be vetted, it needs to be looked at, but it needs to be a lot more diverse involvement and input in those steps. So I will work hard with my other counterparts to make sure, and the mayor, to make sure that we get more of a diverse look at it and more input on different voices instead of always hearing from the same ones that's quote unquote supposed to be the leaders.
Thank you. All right, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you. I do agree 100% with Mr. Clark with the budget for outcomes. I think it's not a working tool that address the key issues that affect our economy and out in our districts. And so we gotta start having more input from the communities that we serve, like what's best suited for them economically, because Chattanooga is growing, right? We may never reach the point of what Nashville is or Atlanta, but right now we're with growing. And so we have to be in position and not just, concentrate on one area, but every area. But with the economic plan, it's going to take everybody, not just the government. And a lot of times we just expect for the government to be the one-stop fix-all, and that just can't happen. That's why you have partnerships and you have different developers and investors that come and take a load off of it to develop your community the way, that's fit for a community to grow and develop. But without having a sound economic plan, nothing could actually happen in our city of Chattanooga. And if we're going to continue to exclude certain voices, our communities will not be thriving economically. And so we first have to get with those communities to see what's best fit, and we have to address absolute poverty, because though addressing that, it takes a whole new form, because you're addressing the entire whole family. What's stopping them from getting a job, right? We need to discuss wages. We need to talk about single parent homes. We need to talk about the road infrastructure. We need to talk about just all of that. And because those things hinder us economically. And then we also have to move past although redlining is, against the law, but there's still words that are used in the practice to prevent investment from happening in certain communities, which is a part of, economic development. And those things are deterrents to a lot of people. And so, and when you have communities that are predominantly Black, like I serve a district that, it is predominantly African American, but we do have, 30 or 40% of Caucasians, and their voice matters too in my district. And we want to make sure that everybody in District 9 have an opportunity to thrive.
Yep, appreciate that. Well, we just have about 5 minutes left. This has been such a good conversation, but we do want to have one quick follow-up. And I think a quick point of clarifications with Rob's question. I think about the economic vision. I think we've seen like a number of both like private entities and both private-public partnerships come up with a number of long-term economic strategies. And so I think the first part is like thinking through how do we actually make good on some of these long-term plans and steps towards that. But in the follow-up, I want to zone in on this question that Jeff put in the chat, because I think it relates. That how will you seek out the opinion of constituents, particularly those who are in more economically depressed neighborhoods, who often have less experience navigating City Hall and the halls of power? And how do you balance the voices of those neighborhoods with the much louder voices in some of the other communities? He points out in his district, it's like East Lake and Alton Park. So as a question, how do you balance the folks who may have automatically already have access versus folks who have less access into the economic planning process? And I'll let anyone who wants to take a stab at it start.
I think, first of all, we have to make sure that we explain the process to them thoroughly, that they understand the process. A lot of people, our constituents, I'm not trying to speak for nobody else, but I'm sure in District 5 as well, does not understand the process itself. They only get what someone tells them. So I think we have to do a better job of totally explaining the process in a way that they understand. Sometimes you lose people in words and verbiage that you use that they don't understand the terminology or the context of what you're talking about because they don't understand the language that you're speaking. So we have to meet people where they're at and explain it to them in a way that they totally understand the process. And then when they totally understand the process, then you can move forward with getting their ideas, helping them, and all those great things.
Mr. Clark?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll let Councilwoman Coonrod kind of close us out with that. You know, I think this is why we all run for office, right? You know, to how do we give a voice to the voiceless? How do we serve underserved people? And that's why I'm running for office, is to create more opportunities for all, because I'm sick and tired of the same people doing the exact same thing. It's the definition of insanity. It's the same people we put on boards. It's the same people we ask their opinions of. And, you know, and when we run for office, we get a list of people who vote. I always tell people, I say, yeah, those are great people to go after to help win. But I want to go after the lost, the left behind, and the lonely. You know, those are the people who we have to serve. That's one of the whole purposes of government, right? And that's the whole purpose for those of who are faith-based. That's why we go into this type of ministry work, is that we don't go to serve the people and to always talk to the people in the ivory towers, right? And so part of being a public servant is really in servanthood, right? And it's going after those people who are the most vulnerable. And we've got to be, and this is a word I haven't heard tonight, we have to be intentional. We have to just be intentional. And we've got to think outside the box. They may not look like us. I tell people, I come with a suit, you know, I don't sag my pants, but I'm gonna talk to the dude who sagged his pants, and I know he probably got an arrest record, but guess what? They're my neighbors and they look like me. And if we don't start helping each other up and helping everybody else's boat rise to the tide, it then becomes a community problem. So that's why we have to stop doing the exact same thing with the exact same people, the elites, the people who are always in the system, but we have to be inclusive towards everybody so that we can get to, well, we can really live to our truths of what government is supposed to be, and that is of the people, and that's all people, not our favorite people, not the people who show up to these Zoom meetings, but the people who oftentimes get left behind. And when we start serving those people, we'll see our community become a lot better, and that's what I'm going to focus on as District 5 next city council person.
I think this guy just won my vote, probably.
Oh, thanks, Bill.
Well, it just,
all right.
it just seems the most.
Let's go on real quick to Miss Coonrod.
I didn't use a word there, but
Billy, you're staying in District 9. Don't get no thoughts of moving.
I was like, where does Billy live? Let's move to District 5, Billy. Coonrod.
All right. Yeah, if we could get Miss Coonrod's answer, and we got to close out here in just a minute.
Yeah, so for me, is what I've done is to engage people who hear from, as I've had them placed on boards, because we've got like this same, I'm just gonna speak on it, the Black community, we have this same group of 10 people that are, you know, people will go to and say, hey, well, I think we should just, well, they're already on all the boards and they're already doing it, you know, making decisions for communities that they're not even a part of, or they're not even engaged totally at all. When you really think of it, they're gatekeepers that prevent certain things from happening. And that's clearly an issue. And so what I do is I go talk to people. I post it on social media, and I, you know, ask and get them involved. When they send me emails, I thank them for speaking out, right? It's just the small things that give them the courage to want to continue to speak out about the things. Here, I invite them to come to different meetings that we have, and, you know, give them more insight to what's happening on a city level. And I continue, like I said, I continue to reach out to our grassroots organizations that help me get the word out as well. They have questions, I get the questions addressed for them. and I don't know it all, and I still, you know, if it's something that I'm not able to answer, I connect them with the appropriate person to get the answers for them. But the most important thing is that I want to make sure that every voice is heard in the decision making when it comes to, you know, everything that's happening in the city of Chattanooga. And sometimes, you know, it could be a lot because I post about it and email it and call, but it's an ongoing campaign to try to get people empowered to want to, you know, be involved.
Thank you for that. All right, we're going to run just like 2 minutes over, but we have one last really important part of this discussion. And that is at Caleb, we're running a campaign and we do have some very specific asks. This final section is just going to be yes, no. Y'all, I think have received these questions ahead of time. So what we're going to do, we have 4 asks. And so I'll ask the first question and then I'll go each by each and get a yes or no, and then we'll move on to the next one. So the first question is, will you commit to develop and implement clear, enforceable, and publicly accessible criteria for the jobs pilot program? And we'll start with Mr. Clark.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, Ms. Coonrod.
Yes.
And Mr. Scott.
Yes.
All right, and the second question, will you help ensure that City Council, relevant boards, and the general public have thorough written information outlining exactly how a proposed tax break will benefit the public? And will you ensure that this information is provided well ahead of any vote on a pilot, TIF, or other form of public incentive? And we'll start with Mr. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Coonrod. And Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Third question, will you support an effort to require relevant boards and the City Council to hold public hearings before a respective pilot proposal is voted on?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, final question. Will you work with Caleb to help identify and set clear expectations for appointees to the Industrial Development Board and the HEB Board? Mr. Clark.
Absolutely. We need more organizations like Caleb helping us through this process. Sorry, I know you said short answer, but absolutely.
All right, Ms. Coonrod.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Mr. Scott. All right.
Yes.
Well, thank y'all so much. This has been an incredible discussion. We really appreciate your time and the engagement. And I know we're a minute over, but we do want to let each candidate have, let's just say, 20 seconds to close out. So we'll start with Mr. Scott. 20 seconds.
20 seconds. As I always say when I end everything that I do, my motto in my campaign is live, we can learn, and we can grow together.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Coonrod.
Let's keep Coonrod. Let's continue to the momentum to thrive in 9.
All right, Mr. Clark.
Caleb, thank you to this organization. If you want to learn more about our campaign, visit our website at dennisclark.org. I'd love to continue this conversation. I think I'm the most qualified candidate with the right type of relationships and the right type of experience to help move our district forward and to create opportunities. And I want to do it with you. So go to dennisclark.org, and I'd love to talk to you a little bit more how we can do that together.
All right. Well, thanks again so much. And really thanks for the folks that are viewing this now, for the folks that are viewing it later. Really appreciate it. And if you want more information about our campaign and to get involved, visit calebcha.org/develop with us. And just so y'all know, we're going to be doing these city council forums for the next 3 days. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're going to be having forums at 7 o'clock each evening. Go to the Facebook page, go to the website for more information. And we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, y'all.